The Commodore 64 Mini is all grown up. The 64 Computer Games and Console was an Indiegogo campaign that launched way back in April 15, 2016. The Mini version releasing late in 2017, with the full keyboard microcomputer version, many people are referring to it as the MAXI, releasing late last year, 2019 in Europe, and has yet to be released here in the US, making the unit I received the European model. You would think this new release of the system with the full-size keyboard would eclipse the Mini version in absolutely every way, and it nearly does, but there is one thing about the Mini that I actually still prefer over this version. Stick around to find out what that is. As was the case with the Mini, this unit includes 64 games in the menu system, which I assume is a nod to the Commodore 64, although about a dozen or so games have been swapped out with new titles, including a few Commodore VIC-20 games. Notably missing is the Commodore Basic game, since it's been replaced with a new game mode option. This device supports cartridge, disc, and tape formats. The computer model menu allows you to select the Commodore emulation you prefer. The options are C64 PAL, C64 NTSC, VIC-20 PAL, and VIC-20 NTSC. There are two main modes on this unit, Carousel mode and Classic mode. The Carousel mode is the main menu system, which allows you to make changes to the console settings and select the games to play. Classic mode allows you to boot up to the system directly into the model you previously selected in the computer model menu, mainly Commodore 64 or VIC-20 Basic. From there you can write programs or load programs from ROMs stored on an external USB flash drive. The Classic mode does not by default include a disk that you can save to, so you must insert an external USB storage device loaded with ROM images. In Classic mode, there are three ways you can access the built-in menu system. The bottom right button on the joystick, pressing the left shift and the top left button on the physical keyboard, or you can press the unit's power button. One of the huge improvements over the Mini is the built-in ability to switch disks from the menu system without having to jump through a bunch of hoops. This works great in Classic mode, not in Carousel mode. Taking a look at what's inside the box, we have a full-sized working keyboard, the Microswitch USB joystick, a micro USB cable, a power adapter, an HDMI cable, and a manual. I have to say I was impressed by the packaging. The unit was surrounded with bubble wrap and the box was enclosed within a plastic bag. Comparing it to the Commodore VIC-20 and an original Commodore 664 size-wise, you can see that it more closely aligns with the Commodore 64 dimensions and design. Similarities. This computer is physically similar to the Mini, although blown up, and they are similar in functionality. The Mini is a darker shade of gray. On both keyboards in the bottom left row of the keyboard, the Commodore key is now the 64 key. Both versions support 720p graphics. You can upgrade the firmware easily on both via the USB flash drive. This is nice since they release firmware updates fairly frequently with bug fixes and functionality improvements. The manual says to ensure your TV or monitor is turned off before connecting to the unit. When it is powered on, we are presented with a quick splash screen and short tune. Most of the carousel menu options are identical. The language and display options are present in both. I like having the options of perfect pixel graphics at 4:3 aspect ratio versus the European and North American CRT display modes. Each of the games on the systems can have up to 4 separate save states. I appreciate that you can turn off the carousel music with the press of a button. You control the menus with the joystick pressing left or right to select a game and pressing the joystick button to launch the game. Any game can be exited by pressing the bottom right button on the included controller. This launches a menu system that, in addition to exiting the game, you can also launch the virtual keyboard or load/save state menu. Take a look at the joystick and at Appendix E, page 101 of the manual to observe the button assignments. I was curious if my RetroLink Innex Classic USB joystick would work, and to my surprise it works on both units. Functionality is limited though, since it is a single button joystick. I was also able to successfully use my NES style 8-button USB joystick, which was featured in a prior video. In fact, the manual states TheC64 works with a wide range of USB joysticks, but you need at least 8 buttons in order to completely replace the functionality of the 64 joystick. You would probably also want to remap the keys to your liking. The negatives. One of the huge negatives was erased with the inclusion of the fully functional keyboard. The keys on the keyboard feel and press softer or easier, less stiff I guess than the original Commodore 64, the one I prefer, leaving the keyboard feeling a little bit cheap. It's also significantly lighter than the breadbox C64, adding to that point. Using the system fresh out of the box, I was able to initiate a hard crash where no keys either on the keyboard or joystick would respond, not even the power button, although I'm not sure I pressed it long enough to power off the unit. In this case, I had to unplug it. This also corrupted one of my saved games, the last one I was using before the crash. I've observed a glitch on high score screens where the system does not respond when hitting return as it should. There ought to be a way to add your own games to the carousel menu, including adding your own preview image, or maybe even allowing for replacing existing games on the carousel. With all the improvements brought to this version of the unit, I'm disappointed not to see a few more things fixed. I still believe it's too easy to accidentally overwrite one of your game saves. A simple "Are you sure?" prompt could easily avoid this. I did accidentally overwrite one of my game saves during testing. There is currently no soft reset of the device, only the hard reset option. Another thing I really think they should address is the ability to swap joystick ports if you're playing with one joystick from the menu system. I realize this can be alternately accomplished through more tedious ways, but really this should be an option straight from the menus. This is not an issue if you have two joysticks plugged in. Both joysticks are automatically assigned to each port. If you have three joysticks plugged in, I made a few casual observations. If two of them are plugged into the right USB ports and one in the back joystick will be ignored. If all three are plugged into the right USB ports, two of the three are assigned to ports 1 and 2, and the third joystick in my example, the RetroLink Innex, was unassigned. Hot swapping the joysticks during gameplay does not always work, and in some cases can cause a sticky joystick malfunction, which can only be remedied by powering off the unit. One final note about the joystick: the Microswitch version, for me, is less responsive for certain fast action video games that have a lot of cornering in them, like my game, GPAC Dementia Defender. In my testing, I missed a lot of turns using the Microswitch joystick, whereas the Mini joystick was much more accurate and just felt smoother. Which brings me to the one thing I actually prefer about the Mini version, the joystick. I have a feeling some of you will disagree with my opinion, but let me know what you think. Commodore purists, such as myself, would have liked to have seen actual physical user and cartridge ports. I have to admit, it would have been sweet to have been able to plug in the old retro cartridges to play the games. The positives. This time around, a few of my wishes were granted, namely the full keyboard and the addition of 2 USB ports. The TheC64 microcomputer looks amazing. It's powered by a 4-core ARM processor, up from 2 in the Mini. I feel the color is just right, although it's slightly darker than my old breadbox C64. It has a nice power LED, 3 USB ports on the right-hand side of the unit, with the 4th one on the rear side, along with the HDMI and power plug, exactly how they should be. Remember, the Mini only had 2 USB ports, and was limited to only 1 port if you had a physical keyboard plugged in. As opposed to the Mini, this version includes a fully functional keyboard with the TheC64 characters imprinted on the front side of the keys. You can even navigate the carousel menu system using only the built-in keyboard. The user manual provides ample detail on page 16. This unit includes a multifunctional micro USB power adapter absent in the Mini. It also includes a new game mode to support the Commodore VIC-20. Another huge bonus with this unit is the multi-disc support included in Classic mode, allowing you to easily switch discs around as needed directly from the menus. Games like Below the Root, for example, pause and ask you to insert side B. This is no longer an issue. One of the minor annoyances with the Mini was when you unplugged the joystick, it would automatically reset back to the menu system. This has now been fixed. The unit will not automatically return to the menus. Instead, it will wait until you plug the joystick back in and allow you to continue where you left off. If 4 ports are not enough, it also supports USB hubs. I understand other reviewers have reported a noticeable reduction in keyboard and audio lag with this version of the hardware. The joystick this time around is the Microswitch version, and is much more clickety-clackety, which many people like. In the carousel, each game has a preview and a brief description including the year it was originally released. When a game is selected, it loads fast. The gameplay feels right to me and the sound effects are spot on. The unit supports 4 save states for each game. If you have a USB device plugged in, an extra menu appears, a USB icon, which if selected will display a file loader screen, allowing you to select from the ROMs loaded onto the USB device, including disk, cartridge, or tape ROMs. A lot of the issues and problems I discussed could be addressed with a future firmware upgrade. Conclusion. I have seen the TheC64 microcomputer on a few sites listed at about £110, or about $144, which is still quite high for what it is in my opinion. They have released a 110-page user manual on Amazon in hardback or paperback versions for £12.99 and £7.99 respectively. It is also available to download for free on their website. I must say it's a great resource loaded with useful information, but for over £100, the user manual should be included with the system. Ultimately, I would like to see the price creep down to somewhere around $50 to $75, which I do think eventually it will. So would this unit make a suitable replacement for the Commodore 64? Actually, this time around, I really do think it will make for a suitable replacement of the actual hardware, especially for the beginner that has never experienced computing on the Commodore 64 back in the day. If you want to learn programming in BASIC and have the ability to use a modern television or monitor and be able to quickly switch to a nice selection of 64 built-in games, this is for you. I think the Commodore 64 microcomputer is an excellent addition to the hardware lineup and I hope it ends up being a huge success. Highly recommended.